Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon in this very intimate format. It's perfect because we will have time to really explore some of the theme we started talking about during the first artist talk of Joël. So for those who were not there, Joël's exhibition started a little bit more than a month ago. And we started with an artist talk, and some of the themes that were talked about at that moment, we really felt, oh, it is such a pity, it was very short. We really want to explore these themes and take a little bit more time to share it with you. And please, it looks a bit formal with the mic like this, but it's completely informal, intimate conversation. Also, feel free to ask any question. This is really a moment of sharing, and it's a huge honor and pleasure for us to have you here once again with us. Joël has been exhibiting all around the world. He was representing the Malagasy Pavilion at the Venice Biennial in 2019. He had a major show at the Macal Museum last year c'était l'année dernière?
2 years ago.
2 years ago in Marrakech. And the co-curator of this show, Meriem Berrada, who could not be here today, was the curator of this show in the Macal Museum. You just got the Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres. So it is an honor for us to be hosting your first solo show in Germany. This first solo show is combined and in conversation with an installation that is at the 𝙒𝙀𝙇𝙇𝘼𝘽𝙄, half an hour from here, that is also going to have a concert and an activation of the 𝙒𝙀𝙇𝙇𝘼𝘽𝙄 tonight. So for those who want to continue the evening with us, we will process later there. But this is your first solo show in Germany. You did it in many places around the world, a lot in Paris, but this is also a first, in the sense, the first film that you are producing. So we will also speak about that. For those who were here a few minutes before the film, you have to imagine, for you who just arrived, the sound of the film is taking the whole room, and it is the sound component in it is very important, and it reminds me of how we started the conversation about the show. A bit more than a year ago, we were sitting on the stairs, and you were talking about the lullaby of your grandmother. Do you mind if we start with that?
It can be. It's a good start. Yes, we can. So thank you for coming, and thank you again, Alya, for this for the invitation, and thank you to Ifa also. It's a pity actually that Meriem is not here because, well, she's somewhere. We don't know exactly where, but we build the show together. So that's the most important thing. Yes, we can go back. It was exactly a year ago. I think I came in August. The desire actually started a year and a half ago. It started exactly in Madagascar. That was actually interesting because you came with Dr. Bonaventure in Madagascar for the opening of the Foundation H. And you had this desire to present something from me here. And just to continue also with the idea of like the two locations, we start also with this idea of the conversation between two institutions, and I will be in the middle. So yeah, that here it can be the chapter 1, and the 𝙒𝙀𝙇𝙇𝘼𝘽𝙄 is the chapter 2, or chapter 2 to chapter 1. But it will be nice for you to see both of them if you can. So yes, we were sitting exactly on the street, like at the main entrance, and then I think we start the conversation with the idea of the memory, and memory is a real question, I think. So on my practice, the question is always very universal, like starting from a memory, starting from an emotion, starting from a politic, maybe action, from a poetry, from different things. But then we have to materialize something. So immediately I arrive on this idea, like, okay, if we talk about the memory, I'm going to present, or I'm going maybe to excavate something very deep, something also very personal. And it's why I told you, like, let's talk about this lullaby that I had, you know, from my grandmother. The lullaby, the personal lullaby that I had from my grandmother who died now, but just for you also to imagine that she experienced actually two periods, the colonization and also the post-colonization, the independence of Madagascar. I think it's also very interesting, you know, to have this confrontation of temporality, but also, you know, like how this woman actually coming from, like, there were 10 children in the family, also, you know, and then she had the other, you know, kids and stuff. So I'm not going to tell you all the story, but for me, like, the personal memory is all of those things. So, and we are here. So it's what I'm telling, it's what I'm putting on the movie today. We start with the lullaby. So maybe to make a description of the movie. So my grandmother, the lullaby was actually a very popular lullaby from Madagascar. The lyrics are very simple to understand. Actually, the parents or the person who is singing the lullaby is giving actually the kid to a white bird and asking the white bird to take this kid somewhere as far as he can. And if the kid is still crying, so the bird can take actually the kid totally away. So that's the melody, that's also maybe the starting point, but actually on the idea of the memory, my personal memory, I decided also to put actually different memories inside. So it's why on the movie you have like a kind of let's say like 4 chapters. The first chapter and the first approach is of course the idea of the mother who is singing for a kid. The second one is actually it's a kind of a love story. It's the end of a love story. There is also another chapter. It's actually the relationship between the human people and also the object. And the last one, it's the question of death and the question of death. Just the question of death. Just to say that personally, I think that the lullaby it's not a soft song. It's not nothing is about tenderness. It's more dramatic. Actually, it's a song that you sing to someone, that you sing somewhere. I'm also talking about the geography. It's important. Maybe you can leave a geography. So for me, the lullaby is something that you sing if you are going to leave something or someone. So I love the title, like the word in French. I'm saying like le chant de l'abandon. In English, it's abandonment. No? Yes, the song of abandonment. So for me, that's the lullaby. So we are singing a lullaby to make things easier, to make things maybe less sad, if I can say that, and also to keep the memory of someone who left, or someone actually who died, because I'm talking about death. So it's why you have actually on the movie a different approach. I think you will ask me also the aesthetic of the movie. So it's my first movie, and the exercise for me was to put actually like maybe all my practice, of course, but also all my visions inside the movie. So of course, Madagascar was important because we shoot the movie in Madagascar, we edit the movie in Madagascar, we also build the song in Madagascar, and we edit the song in Madagascar. So it's almost like 99% a Malagasy production. So it was really, it's really kind of it's a statement on a certain point. But thank you, Ifa, but you produce also the movie. And so, as I said before, I think I put everything in this movie. So Of course, you know, my hometown, my motherland. I put my personal stories, the different steps of my personal stories. Of course, my grandmother, my romantic relationship, maybe. Also, the aesthetic of the object. So each object that you have on the movie actually is a reference for me, an historical reference or an art reference. So you have many things. So it's a kind. It's not autobiographic piece, but you have something really personal. So if you ask me the question like why the movie is in black and white, the answer is just like I think it's as a starting point. I think it's very important to use this kind of a very classical aspect. Of course, you have the question of elegance on the movie also, and my answer is like I think I'm always trying to be elegant, you know, on my work, and then we can move later on the architecture part. But between this elegant thing, there's something very dangerous, very dramatic, very dirty also maybe behind, something very surprising. So yeah. I'm not going to describe like everything, but for me, it's like I really put like, yes, my breath, my heart, my soul, everything on this movie. And it's the first time that I did this kind of thing. I'm doing drawings, I'm doing installations. Of course, you know, I spent a lot of energy and a lot of research on many things in some places, but this one was really intense. And the movie also creates some very interesting discussions, and especially with the institution, with the curators also. At the beginning, it was like a little bit dramatic, but at the end, it was very interesting. Like, okay, what is the meaning of this? The borders, you know, like suddenly the movie became a little bit provocative also. So, voilà.
Yes, it's the process also of exchanging around. I feel when you describe there is nothing more intimate than making a movie because you want to put everything in there, and how you share it. But it was also something extremely interesting in the conversation. It was the sonic component, because how you wanted to play with the sound. And what was very inspiring when we started the conversation around that is you were talking about the lullaby of your grandmother and the words. The words have a huge importance in your practice, and we'll come back to that later. But then it's what happens when the words, some of the lyrics themselves are forgotten, and what happens when it's our body that remembers. So when you were talking about this universality, there is a feeling of how our body reacts to the memory, and even if it is from a very specific context, it would speak to, I think, all of us. And this universality of the rhythm of the memory, of how it speaks to the body beyond our understanding, but also this interstice, so these spaces in between, when, I don't know if you would call it the conscious memory, would have forgotten the words. And there your poetic practice comes in. You create new words with your experience, with the years that came after, and how you played in between, this in-betweenness. I found it very, very fascinating.
It's very interesting that you point this space between, because like, when I'm presenting my work, not as a discussion like this, but when I'm presenting my work, I'm talking about emotion, of course. I'm using the word exercise. Even if I'm an artist, I'm always saying that I'm doing an exercise, because it's a never-ending research and it's a never-ending story. And then I'm pointing the idea of the duality, but when you're pointing the duality, there is always something in between. It's starting from from life and death. It started, and then we have, of course, like the black and white, and then you have you and me, or the other and us. the idea of the other is something very important also. I think we talked about this because it's like it's me, it's I, and the other. It's us and the other. And the question of the other is going really like, we can go really far on this question. But the real, I think the real element is always in between. Even on temporality also. Of course, we talk about, the past, the future, and the present, but I think those elements are totally over. Now it's between, the past and the present. There is something that you have to define. Between the present and the future, we have to define something between. We know exactly what is the future already. So, but what will happen, what is happening exactly between the present and the future? So I'm very interested in this notion of like in between, because I think like all the contemporary construction are there. And I think, and it's why, well, I'm doing my own research on this, but I think we have to put like more attention on it. Because I think this is the real present, this is the real emotion, this is the real us also. But sometimes, of course, there's always there's a lot of images, but I think between two images there is something. There are two geographies or more geographies, but I think we have really to point at the idea of like two geographies. Then we can go on something very political, because are we in a moment that we have to create maybe a new lens, for example? Real question. Do we have to create a new taste? Do we have to create a new identities also? When I'm pointing this idea of identity, because I'm from Madagascar, but I'm also French. I'm working between Antananarivo and Paris. But actually, well, those are geographies. But for me, the more interesting thing actually are like between. When I'm traveling, when I'm thinking about at the same time, of the two locations, but I'm somewhere else. So I don't have any answer. It's just c'est une posture. It's a gesture that I'm assuming. But just like I think that's the most contemporary action from now. And I think there is the real question are there. Between noon and midnight, there is a lot of things, but we have to question many things. We can go on a very deep conversation about this. I don't know if you agree with that, but
it's interesting to look at you talking about it and seeing the installation here, because when you talk about the spaces in between and the lands in between or the letters in between, when you look at this installation from where you are, you cannot read everything. Mm-hmm. And how words, letter, the alphabet are in your practice something like a kind of response to this in-betweenness. Do you want to say a little bit more about it?
You are totally right, and that was the idea. Just for the installation, actually, when I came here, not for the first time, when I came, and when we decided actually to do the project, for me it was very interesting to play. To create actually a new space in between inside and outside. And even inside, I'm creating actually another inside, and another kind of inside, to create another layers and another space in between. To create another complex situation, or another complex situation for the body, for the human flesh and the human body. The texts are totally connected with this idea of in between. Because we all know the power of words. When we say the stars, we all know what is the stars. We all know. We all imagine what is the star. But I like the idea. I think the projection of imagine a new kind of star, something that we can't get perfectly, that we all know, and we all know the science of the star. We all know the geometry of the star. We all know the composition of the star. But it's something that we have to recreate in our own dreams. And for me, that's the main element. And I think the words are actually part of the process, or maybe part of the ingredients, to get or to understand or to define the space between. Sometimes when I'm reading a novel or when I'm reading a text, sometimes I'm playing, sometimes I'm trying, to choose some words. And I always love, when someone is writing, They are writing something, but there is always something, behind. So there is always something in between. For example, when you read the lyrics of the song, it's very interesting. Of course, you have the melody, the power of the melody. But when you read and when you reread, actually, the lyrics, there is another message. So this kind of forbidden message, or maybe the missing message, I think that's the main element. And the words are an amazing. Word is an amazing tool, to get there.
It's also the scale of the words. You are trained as an architect. I can sometimes, when I would talk about you, I would say it's an obsession. L'architecture, it inhabits your life, in your practice. And this measure that you put in, you could have just put the words and the words are there, but like the statement of the size of the words, of this scale, what it creates to the body, this measure of this architectural intervention, what is in your practice, how it's diffused in your work, cette partie de mesure.
Interesting when you say that architecture is part of my life, and I think that's the answer. I'm an architect, but I'm not an architect. Architecture is somewhere inside. I'm going to tell you another story first, because actually when I was like 18, and it's a terrible moment actually when you're like 18. I think I prefer now. And there was a big question, like I had to study. So some people say that you have to go in the art school at 𝙒𝙇𝙇𝙇𝘼𝘽𝙄𝙎. Some people say, you have to go design and maybe more fashion. Some people say, cinema is an amazing thing. So everybody, has, some ideas about your future. So I decide to do something that the people actually doesn't like. Well, it's not that they didn't like, but something that was not on my list. So I said, why not architecture? And for me, when I decided to study architecture, there was no projection to become an architect. Definitely not. The only thing, for me, the most interesting thing on architecture, actually, it's the spirit of architecture and the process of architecture. So it's why I study architecture during 5 years. I finished my school, I present my diploma and my degree and everything, but I'm not an architect, but I can build something, but I'm not an architect. But I prefer to say that I'm thinking as an architect, and I'm breathing as an architect. And it's why you're totally right when you're saying that, yes, it's inside. So, yes, it's part of my life, it's part of my practice, it's part of me. And it's all of me also. The most interesting thing on architecture is actually when you receive an invitation or when you receive a commission, you are not just an architect who is making a sketch on a paper. You have to think about the paper, you have to think about your line, you have to think about the neighborhood, you have to think about the land, you have to think about the technique, you have to think about the people, you have to think about the lifestyle, you have to think about the social life, you have to think about the history. And this is the magical thing of architecture. You have to make a lot of analysis, and it's why, of course, it takes time. It's why I don't want to be an architect, because I'm not passionate enough. But I like the idea of arriving in Berlin, preparing a show, for IFA, walking on the streets, sitting with Alya at the entrance, and thinking about the street, thinking about the window, thinking about inside, thinking about, the second layers of the space also, and then pointing the idea of the memory. So I think I gave you all the process and all the recipe of how I'm working. So it's a structure, it's a mental structure, and it's just, for me it's just like it's very normal. And I'm doing the same thing when I'm working. For example, at my studio, when we are in a project, we are working on a project as an architect. Of course, I'm doing a sketch, but I'm always asking for a dossier at the end, to all of my team. Like, there is a text, there is actually a design, there is the title with thinking about, the design of the title, because we are using the font of the studio, because it's part of the aesthetic, but it's also part of the statement. And we already, we're doing the 3D also, to get in, to understand. So I'm also using, the tools of architecture, because I think the tools of architecture are amazing, because at the end, when you're preparing a show, you always have a maquette, and then you put like your painting is here. So I think it's an amazing, it's an amazing practice, actually, the architecture. And then, maybe just to finish this part of the measures of architecture, I think for me it's very important when I'm inviting the audience, to enter my show, or when they enter, one of my projects, to react, not just to react, visually, not to react only, with the sound, and not just like, okay, great, but to react, like the whole body can react, because when you are in front of the door, actually the show starts on the street, so even the movement of your body trying to read the text is totally different. And when you enter in, and then it's blocked, and then you have a choice, am I going left or going right? It's a real question for the body. And as you said before, if you want to read the text, you can't read the text at one time. You have to go from the left to the right, and then you have to make a lot of exercise with your eyes and with your mind. And then you go on the backside, and there's also another layers. So I'm trying to create something maybe total. It's what I'm trying to do.
It was very interesting how you're describing, because actually it was one of my pending questions, like how do you work with the studio, because you have the studio in Paris, in Tana, we have Rin also who is with us, who is a part of the studio. So this collaborative part. On the one hand, I follow and I understand. On the other hand, what I see, like how this collaborative part, like when you think and talk about it as an architect, there is this strict elements of like perfect drawing and all of that. When we received, when we were preparing the show and we received like the 3D installation, we were like amazed, very, very happy. There is also another part that you're not talking about. It's this collaboration that you do beyond the studio as an architect. It's deep collaboration with the artisan, where you completely take in the messiness also. Mm-hmm. And the unpredictability of the deadline, and the not only connected, it's not connected to the practice of the artisanat itself, but because you push the conversation to create some method that do not exist, so that you cannot plan as an architect. One example is the installation that we have there, where you have been doing this, c'est une expérimentation, is with raffia. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, and about the title also that you chose for that?
Maybe just to go back on the studio. So in Madagascar you have, now we have like 6 people, and in Paris 7. Rin is more part of Madagascar, but it's also based in Berlin. Actually, all the people at the studio, of course, they are working for me and with me, but they also have their own personality and their own background, and their own background are very important for me. Of course, we are sharing ideas, but they are also participating on some very specific things sometimes. So it's a collaborative system, but you also have like really, sometimes I need a specific person to create something. Just to give you an example, for example, the song, on the movie, the song, and the main, actually the main actress, actually Zara, and Zara is also part of the studio. But she's coming from the Cours Florent, and she's an actress at the beginning, but she joined the studio, and now she's in charge, she's an assistant production and coordination. But also pointing, I'm not surrounded only by artists, I'm not surrounded only by architects. I only have one architect actually. Then let's go back on the hands and the artisans. To give you a very simple answer, maybe I can say like, in confrontation of the radicalism of the architecture, I need something more messy from the artisans. Of course, no, but at a certain point, yes, there is something like that, from the very specific and and with all the measurement, sometimes I also need, I need something more fragile. And I'm using the word of fragility because for me that's the most interesting thing. I'm always saying that, on an architecture there is a sensuality, and there is a spirit on an architecture. And well, I'm not going to give you a list of architects, but even if you are in front of minimalist and radical concrete, there is something behind. The something behind is the soul of the architect, but actually the things behind actually are all the constructors and the hands who built these very minimal elements. And I'm always paying a tribute, and for me it's beyond the idea of a tribute. It's really, again, it's part of me, it's part of our life. Those hands, of course, you have all the people who think about, but you also have those hands who are building for us. And the tribute of those hands for me are just like, it's part of our life, it's part of my life, it's part of my brief also. So the artisans, it's because I'm very playful. I'm not just asking them like, okay, this is a glass, can you reproduce this glass for me? Because this is not interesting. And if I'm asking that, I'm not playing with the idea of the fragility. Again, space between fragility, I think for me, it has the same meaning. The idea is to work with them, but to collaborate with them with their own identity in confrontation with my own identity. And there is a reaction. So just to give you a specific example, for example, when I had this solo exhibition in Marrakesh at the Macad, curated by Meriem Berrada, and my condition was to produce like all the show, all the exhibition. It was like huge. It was a very big show. Everything in Marrakesh. And with Meriem, we agreed with the idea like everything has to be built with different artisans, from textile to metal to sound to glass to ceramics and everything. But the formula that I ask is like, okay, I'm going to give a sketch, I'm going to give a line, I'm going to give an aspect, I'm going to give a sensation, something, but the artisans, they don't have to reproduce what I'm asking, they have to make make the construction of my thing, but with their own vision. Just to give you, there was actually, to be more specific, there's actually on the show there was an installation made with 50 roses made with metal. So actually I brought to the artisan a real rose, and I asked them to reproduce the rose with their own vision of rose. So we had like 50 different types of roses made with them, and I think the emotion is there, and it's what I'm trying, to figure out all the time. But the question is not my idea. The question is not actually the final object made by the artisans. It's exactly the relation between what were we building together. It's exactly the same idea with the raffia, the embroidery. So a year ago I started this new process of the embroidery. So I'm making my own drawings with my own hand, and I'm giving this drawing to the person who is doing the embroidery. And the action is not just like reproduce it. I'm giving my hand. So I'm throwing my drawing, and the final piece it's my drawing with another hand on it. That's the concept. So I did it with some specific thread, for embroidery. So then I tried for this exhibition, and it's the first time, again, experimentation and going on trying to go somewhere else, to work on raffia. I don't know if you know the fiber. The fiber is very fragile. So I asked the artisan to make the same process, my drawings, and I give them my drawings, and then they do the embroidery with raffia. But the problem with the raffia that it's very fragile, and then when you make one knot, and then it's broken. So you have to do it again, you have to knot and to reproduce it again. Now the piece is done, and it seems very beautiful, and you have my words on it and my drawings. But the most interesting thing on those pieces are those broken elements, those broken moments all the time that you have to redo, you have to. It's a kind of a rebirth all the time. You have to be super passionate. And I think with the idea of the memory, it's very interesting. There was an amazing show a few years ago called Broken Memories, I think you know, but well, it's a kind of a reference. But I think to create a memory, you have to kill something. You have to kill someone also to create a memory. Your memory starts from somewhere, with someone, but you have to recreate it to create another thing, or maybe to stay alive also. There is a different way to approach the memory. So I think those pieces I'm trying to define these elements. Unfortunately, the pieces are done and they are beautiful, so no one knows the secret behind. And it's terrible, you know, maybe to film it and to put it next to the piece. But thank you for coming, and now you came, and now you know the formula behind. But that's all the process. Yeah.
And it was very beautiful when you were talking about the stars. We had an artist who had a show here, I think 2 years ago, 𝙒𝙀𝙄𝙎𝙎, and she was talking, she made the piece 𝙒𝙀𝙄𝙎𝙎𝙎, where she was playing with the words, and it's a film in the sense like le film, like really la pellicule of the film, so you cannot watch it. And from that, you have a projector, and you see she made with the scalpel cutouts, and you see the projection of the stars. And she says that that's what desire is this impossible movement and distance that you can never reach, but this cet appel to go there towards the stars. And about desire, you said something very, very moving, because after this first film, which was, as you described, a very strong, emotionally intense process, which took the shooting time did not take a lot of time, but still it was extremely intense and difficult. Still, at the end of it, you talked about this desire of a second one.
Yes.
Is it still the case afterwards?
It's still the case. Well, but I gave a birth with this one, so now I'm looking for new kids, and a second one.
Another baby.
It was the movie was, of course, the movie was very intense, like extremely intense, like totally everything was very intense, because I took all my studio in Antananarivo, and then we, even this idea like living together for 1 week, like thinking, living, building, making the movie, it's extremely intense. But yes, I would love to do another one. So thank you, Ifa, thank you, Alya, for taking me, somewhere, and yeah, the movie. So I will try to make another one next year. But there is also something very interesting. I'm preparing actually a solo show at the Fondation 𝙒𝙀𝘼𝙎𝙎 in January in Benin, and the curator and the owner of the foundation actually came to Berlin, and she saw the movie. Just for you to know, 6 months ago, we already built actually, the project and everything. We were on something very political, like talking about, like how can I talk about the Africanism, but with emotions, emotionally. When she saw the movie, she asked me, like, can we change like all the project, and can we take the movie as a starting point for the show? So the show is opening in January, but now the movie is going to be the starting point of the show in the middle of the museum, and then I have to rebuild everything around. So, yeah. So the movie is yes, there will be another kid, but even this one is already going somewhere. It's the movie is going also in Paris in October. We're projecting the movie during Art Basel Paris. But yeah. But we talked about desire. Yes, I'm using a lot this word desire. Of course, desire is desire, and immediately we can think about the romantic and the sentimental part. But for me, it's not just that. For me, desire is everything. It's like when I was talking about the lullaby. For me, desire has a lot of meanings and a lot of powers. If you want to become a president, you need a lot of desire. If you want to fall in love with someone, you need a lot of desire. If you want to build something, you need a lot of desire. So again, desire is part of the ingredient of the construction of the space between us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all your recipe with us. Yes, if anyone has a question, would like to react on something, this is the time, now or never.
Wow. I'm always surprised when no one is asking a question. It means that it was so clear. No? And sometimes I'm taking it as a compliment. No?
It was very beautiful. I found it very, very beautiful.
Maybe I would like to thank you for presenting this, because when I first saw the film and the whole surrounding, for me it was I didn't know your whole background and everything, but I came from outside, hectic Berlin, and you come into a space and see a film which calms you down so much, and which is so aesthetic that it also gave a lot of inspiration to me, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. You point something very interesting, and it was part of our discussion with Alya, aesthetic. It was really a question. It was it was a real question between us, and especially with the context of Berlin.
Yes.
Like, okay, how can we deal with this? So, but we are abusing the idea of aesthetic as a statement. And I think we agree with Alya and with Meriem, the curators, and we totally agreed that it's also very important. And I'm convinced that aesthetic can change actually, the face of the world. Aesthetic can create actually new hopes also.
Sure, yes.
And you are very positive. Before I came here, I was afraid I'm going to see something of these things which you often run into. You deconstruct everything, everything is like, nothing is okay. And so it raises your spirits. And that's rare today. So also me, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, because, to build something positive, I went on a very dramatic way. It was a long, long, long road. No, but thank you. Well, it's also important to be positive, no? It's important to be positive. It's important to... I think it's important, even if the word is dramatic, even we have to say something dramatic, we can say it beautifully, or maybe we can say it, with a certain kind of elegance, maybe. I don't know, I'm constructing a new product on my mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you.